Hey, hi, how are you?
Hey Gaurav, I'm good. How are you?
Good, yeah, good.
So I'll just start off with a brief introduction, yeah?
Sure.
Okay. Hi everyone and good afternoon. My name is Abhishek Raghunath and you know me as one of the trainers here at SEAL. Welcome to our next episode of SEAL where our live chat show when we talk to people who have made a significant difference in the world of business and entrepreneurship. Today we're talking to one of those people who has carved out a niche for themselves and made a dent in the universe in the world of finance. These are I'm talking to someone in the usual tradition of SEAL, where we keep pushing ourselves to go out and meet people, meet new businesses, and find out what are the skill sets of the future that our students need to have, so that we can talk to them and help them equip themselves with those skill sets. And one of our favorite modules at SEAL is finance, because we have a lot of students who are coming in. They're very afraid of finance, afraid of numbers, but then after a week of sessions with the trainers, Ashwin and Pooja, they all go back fully charged up, excited to explore new careers in finance, and most of them also start investing into mutual funds. It's their first exposure to mutual funds that they get. And speaking of mutual funds, we have Gaurav Rastogi here with us today, CEO and founder
Hi,
of Kuvera.in. Hi Gaurav. Kuvera is a fintech company that helps people start investing into mutual funds themselves. It's a very cool company that empowers people to take control of their financial planning and investment goals, and it helps them become their own personal wealth managers. And it's the brainchild of Gaurav and his team, and he's had a very storied journey. He started off, he graduated from IIT Delhi and then went on to the University of Chicago to complete his post-graduation. He's worked with Morgan Stanley as an investment banker, and then he started Kuvera to enable people to start investing. So Gaurav, first question to you. You hold degrees from IIT Delhi and the University of Chicago. What is it about finance that attracts so many engineers?
It's not just finance, most graduates happen to be engineers, so it doesn't matter which vertical you look at, there will be a lot of engineers there. For me, it was at that time when I graduated. I can't say that it was a very conscious choice to get into finance. I somewhat lucked into it. This was in IIT Delhi. The year I graduated, there's a credit card company called Capital One out of the US, and they came on our campus to recruit. They gave me an offer. The job was to work in the US as a business analyst for their super prime card division, right? So I took that offer without knowing actually much about finance or about credit cards, to be honest. And then it just kind of joined them in Richmond, Virginia, and actually on my job I got to learn about finance and developed a lot of interest in finance. So then I went to the University of Chicago to get my MBA, because I wanted to formally kind of study investing per se, and then pursue it as a career. So yeah, but it wasn't. I think when I graduated, there was no such deep thinking going on.
You were with Morgan Stanley for a while before you started Kuvera, and
Right.
One of the things you've mentioned in our conversations is that you saw that the world of investing is very skewed towards the people who have money, and you sort of wanted to change that whole thing. So could you tell us your thought process in starting off with Kuvera?
See, what happens is, right, there was this very famous bank robber in the 1920s, right? I forget his name, but the story is still very relevant. So when he was asked why does he rob banks, he said because that's where the money is. So if you look at large wealth managers, or if you look at banks who have big wealth management arms, they're usually big teams. They need to be able to generate a lot of revenues for the teams to be profitable. You think of an IIFL Wealth, if you think of like Citibank Private Wealth, or any one of them, doesn't matter, right? So they have huge salary overheads, they have huge office overheads. So naturally, for the relationship managers, given a choice, they will always go to someone who has more money, because they make more commissions, they make more revenues for the same, roughly similar amount of time. So any kind of that high-touch business almost always skews towards the really rich. So there's a huge gap then opens up, which we call the mass affluent, or like in India you can think of it as the middle class or the upper middle class, where they're not getting the level of service that they should get, mostly because the portfolio sizes are not large enough and will not generate the amount of fees that some of these wealth managers require. And that's where we think technology can play a very dramatic role in transforming what kind of advice they get, how do they get that advice, and how are they able to manage their portfolios.
Okay. And then this strategy of yours has paid off really well because, in the short span of time that Kuvera has launched, you guys already have managed more than 8,500 crore of funds that has come in through Kuvera. So were you expecting something like this to grow up so fast? I think you're India's second largest, fintech company after Zerodha, if I'm not mistaken.
In direct mutual funds, yes.
In direct mutual.
Yeah, direct mutual. I mean, in fintech, it depends on which vertical you're talking about, and that matters a lot. So, were we expecting that? So, of course, right. I mean, you do want a good outcome when you start, especially in a startup, where things in general are not very kind of clear on how they will go. So, you do almost kind of hope that the outcome will be good. But yeah, I mean, this kind of exceeded a bit our expectations a little bit. But I think that also goes to the kind of team we have built and the kind of product we have built. So it took us some time. It took us a couple of iterations. It wasn't easy to be able to come in and say, hey, you know what, this is what people want. Money management particularly is very hard because different people have different relationships with money. It's not a homogeneous product. Payments is a very homogeneous product. You want to pay for something, right? It's a very homogeneous product. But wealth management or investing is a lot more nuanced. You have to understand who the investor is. You have to try and figure out what kind of investor they are. Then you have to try and figure out, okay, what kind of investing nudges will work best for them. So it takes time. I mean, it is doable, of course. I think technology will play a larger role in wealth going forward. So yeah, very interesting time for us.
How does the whole tech bit fit in? I mean, you guys are a robo advisory, so when you talk about wealth management, it has to be, as I said, it has to be nuanced. So, how much tech do you need in order to customize it for as far as possible you can to understand your customer and understand their financial needs and investment goals?
Yeah, so very, very, very interesting question, right? So if you were, if the focus is to being a transactional platform, then actually you don't need a lot of tech. That's the easy part. I think the enabling buys themselves, right? When you get to the advisory piece, where it matters who the end investor is. It matters whether they're married, whether they're single. It matters whether they have kids or they don't have kids. It matters what kind of goals they are planning for. Technology becomes very, very important. That's where you have to really kind of start investing in building out these, decision engines is what we call them, because that's what they are. And that's where technology becomes very interesting also, because a lot of these are not closed form solutions. There's no formula that you can solve for and you'll get a right answer. Investing is a very probabilistic science. You have a probability of success, you have a probability of failure, right? No one can guarantee a return. No one can say, hey, this is what is going to happen, right? So it works on scenario analysis. So now you have to take that construct and then you have to think about, okay, what kind of scenarios are the most ideal outcomes for an investor, and then match the two. So technology actually becomes, once you start getting into the advisory space, technology becomes very complex, partly because of that and partly also because investing has a lot of edge cases.
Okay. How do you approach it from a point of view that says, I'm going to minimize the ratio of error that can creep in? So is that a continuous learning process, or how does that work? Do you guys take a call every month or something like that?
It's of course a continuous learning process. I think any customer service and any user experience, right? And if you are a customer-facing company, that your entire company is your user experience. It has to be focused on, improving every day, right? So um, if you know, if a lot of the students who are with you, if they, you know, the first thing you probably teach them is the power of compounding.
Yep.
Right? And the same concept applies for companies as it applies for investments. If you are building a product, doesn't matter what that product is. In our case, it's personal finance. In someone else's case, it could be cars. In someone else's case, it could be, you know, credit cards. If your organization can be progressively better every week, every month, that having that ingrained in your organization is a huge factor for success. So if you can say that we are building a culture where whatever we do today, however we do it today, in 1 month we'll be doing it better. It'll be faster. It doesn't have to be necessarily lower number of errors. It could be that it's faster. It could be that it's more seamless. It could be that it is presented in a way that users find more approachable. It could be errors. So in the organization, in any organization, and the whole, you know, like you can do an MBA in finance, you can do whatever, you know, study for in any way or form. But when you join a company, it's that pursuit that kind of, I think, differentiates the really good companies from the kind of, you know, not so good companies.
And then when you look at it, you know, when you speak about taking the culture of organization and making it better every day, every week, for someone who's starting off, and when you put your team together, you've put together a very, very good team. How important is it to get the right people in the right fit? And more importantly, how do you decide who are the right people?
Yeah, see, I mean, recruiting is the dark arts, right? I mean, there is, you can put in a 50-factor model or a 100-factor model, but nothing predicts anything, right? So, at the end of the day, what we look at and what we would want to kind of continue to kind of, you know, recruit for is ability is important, but intent or character is way more important. But the most important aspect is communication. I think people who are good communicators and have the raw ability, right? So you have the raw ability, or you have that willingness to learn, or you have that kind of fire, and you communicate well, then you can probably learn any and all jobs. When people say, right, like everyone wants to hire the best people, I mean, nothing goes beyond it. But most of the work that we do and most of the work that most of the corporations do, I mean, it's actually not rocket science. It literally is not rocket science, right? So, but what differentiates people within a company is literally their ability to learn. So they should have that fire and communication. Like they should be able to communicate up the chain and down the chain. What we find and what I find that is the hardest skill set to recruit in India is communication.
Yeah, that is true. We are more used to being told what to do. We are able to communicate what we want to say or how things can get better. There's no opinion, it's just a chain of command.
Plus, I think our educational system has been such that, you know, we only speak up when we have the answers, right? So it's like we're so used to giving tests, right? So we think everything is not a test. Once you're at a work environment, you are solving problems collectively. Discussions help solve things faster. Discussions help move things faster. If you wait, like, okay, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to wait, and when I'm going to completely solve this, and then I'm going to take it to my boss or take it to my, then you've wasted a lot of time.
That's not going to happen, yeah.
That's not going to happen. And that's what communication is. It's not about being very, you know, we're not looking for Shashi Tharoors. That's not what communication is. We're not talking about oratorial skills and being very, like, you know, charming with words. Communication.
And then, you know, we have a very, very young audience. Most of them are aged between 18 to 22. So how would you advise them to look at investing?
See, to be very honest, right? I mean, I didn't start investing till after I had my first job, right? You should see if you get pocket money, or if you have a part-time job you do, if you are making money, if you have an income, then think about investing, think about saving. Don't force yourself. I think there is. See, the math will always tell you the sooner you invest, the better off you are, right? But that does not mean that you have to, you have to also live your life. You can't just stop cutting corners and then kind of just because you want to start investing.
Yeah.
That's also not advisable, right? So, if you have excess money, then maybe, if you've already had 3 beers, don't have that 4th beer and invest that money. That makes sense.
Yep.
But don't deprive yourself of the first beer, right?
Of the first.
That's what I mean, yeah.
All right. So, today we are also living in a world of instant gratification. Everybody wants things immediately. But in investing is a lot about having that proper discipline so that you don't move off the tracks. How do you do that in a world where attention span has come down to something like 7 seconds? Like, how do you inculcate the culture of discipline?
See, discipline. What we say, right, and what we have seen that works is something as simple as a SIP, which is just a monthly investment plan, right?
Yeah.
It creates a habit, and it's also on an auto mode. It happens automatically.
Yeah.
That matters a lot. So if you're focused too much on something, you tend to take more decisions. You tend to buy more than you should or sell more than you should. Neither is good for your portfolio.
Yeah.
So one of the easiest ways to kind of begin that discipline is say, every month I'm going to do a 500 rupees sale. Actually, in today's day and age, you can even start with a 100 rupees sale.
Yeah.
But so you're not doing it because that 100 rupees sip will, become a huge amount of money. You're doing that because once you start, you're building that habit of investing. You're building that character. You're building that, so it becomes natural for you to invest. So then, when you have 20,000 rupees, you start investing 20,000 rupees. When you have 50,000 rupees, you start investing 50,000. But the key here is that if you can spare 100 rupees a month, start a SIP. Just keep investing. Don't think about it. Just put it in a single index fund and just keep investing every month, because what you're building when early on, till you're about 18 to almost like 25, 26, what you're really building is the habit. The money that you will start investing will come once you have a good job or a great job. But the habit can be built early on. So there's no harm in kind of focusing on doing that.
So, the markets are pretty volatile right now. And so with so many fluctuations, how can Kuwera help people invest? How can Kuwera help potential investors sort of look at the market? Because we've always told students, whenever the market goes down, you guys are 18, 19, you have until 60 to make your money. So any amount of money that you put now is going to give you mad compound rates of interest. So how does Kuwera come into that place?
So see, it's nudges like these, right? So I think when markets crash, there is a natural fear. It's a justifiable fear. People are afraid. They think it's going to go to zero. It's hard-earned money. It's money you have invested. You'll be like, oh my God, I don't want to lose all of this money. I'm at least getting 70 rupees back of the 100 I invested. Let me just take that 70 and be happy, right? But the framing matters, right? The other way to frame the same thing is that, hey, you know what? You started investing when Nifty was at 12,000. And you thought that, at 12,000, this is a good idea. Then how can it be a bad idea at 9,000? Right? So, framing the problem correctly, showing people historical data that some of the best returns you could have gotten in investing is when the markets have crashed 30-40%, right? Showing them that data helps a lot, because then people can see, oh, it has happened before. Otherwise, what happens is people think that you're just making up stories, right? But then you say, no, look at the dot-com bust. If you had invested in 2001, 2002, you would have had a fantastic 4-5 year run. Look at 2008, 2009. If you had invested in the great financial crisis of 2008, 2009, you would have had a fantastic 10-year run till about last month.
Till February.
Yeah. Until February, it was an 11-year bull market. It was unprecedented bull market.
Yeah, we've never seen a bull market like that.
No one is saying that it's going to happen again, but at least showing them all of this data, and also nudging them. So what we have also realized is that sometimes people will get very emotional about money, and then they are like they're making that they're trying to stop a sip, or they're trying to take money out because of that emotion, right? At that time, if we nudge them that, hey, you know what, you might want to look at this data, or you might want to read this report before you take this action, makes a huge difference. So I think platform like ours, basically it's about creating that habit to invest. Educating people by showing them the data that, hey, you know what, this is what happened in past episodes, so no need to be scared, this is what markets do. And finally, nudging them at the right time to take the right action. That's how I think we add value to an investor's journey.
So then, again, just combining this answer and the previous one. So for someone who's a newbie and who's looking, where to, even if they have 100, 500 rupee note, 500 rupees that they can invest every month, would you say a simple index fund is a good place to start off for them?
Oh, simple index fund is the best place to start. I mean, if it's your first investment, don't go for sector funds. Don't go for thematic funds. That's where a lot of the marketing in AMCs happen.
Okay.
A lot of the marketing happens in thematic funds. India this story, India that story, global this story, global that story, or sector funds. The reason is because there are so many sectors. Some or the other sector has done really well in the past 3 years.
Yeah.
And they're going to come and push that fund to you. Right?
All right. But maybe they've already peaked.
Maybe they've already peaked, maybe they have not. You don't know, right? So, and it's very difficult to build sector expertise. Right? I mean, I know people who have worked in a particular sector for 20 years, and they can't call their sector rallies.
All right.
It's not an easy thing, because just because you're working in a sector also doesn't mean that you know a lot about the macro tailwinds and all of that, right? So we suggest stick with index funds. Stick with large cap, mid cap, small cap, any kind of index fund that you like. But don't go to thematic baskets and don't go to sector specific funds.
All right. Now, getting back to students who are looking at a career in finance. So if we have a lot of undergraduates who graduate from your BCom, BFM, BAF degrees. So but we are only trained in accounts when we graduate from college. We're not trained in finance. We know where to make our entries, but we don't know how to look at finance. So what are the skill sets that business students should be looking at if they want to build a career in finance? When I'm talking about business, I mean commerce students should be looking at when they want to build a career, apart from your accounts.
Right. See, again, I'll go back to kind of. You have to have some. See, what has happened over time. So there are two parts to the answer. The first part is what has happened over time is finance has become super specialized. There was a time when it was more of a generalist, it was a generalist field, right? People used to think that finance people are a general people.
Yeah.
Right? But that has changed now, right? So it is a specialized field. So finance itself is a very broad spectrum. Do you want to be in the treasury? Do you want to be a trader? Do you want to be an investment banker? Do you want to be working for Big Four as an audit or So when people go to recruit, at least when I go and recruit, right? It helps if someone has at least thought through what kind of work they would like to do.
Okay.
It helps if they have thought through some skill sets that are important for them and have at least put in some effort to acquire those skill sets. No one, see, especially when you're hiring for an analyst role, right, or an associate role, you want them to you want to see just that drive, and you want to see that ability to learn. That's what you want to see in that person.
Yeah.
Most recruiters are not too worried about the depth of your skill set or whether you know this and you don't know that. All they want to see is that, hey, you know what, can this person be trained? When we used to be at business school and we used to have a lot of these kind of recruitment kind of talks and all, one of the biggest reasons someone hires an analyst or an associate is that, will I be happy working with this person day in and day out for the next year? Right? So if you're a presentable person, you're a jolly person, you know what you're doing, you're a happy person, you're actually doing going to be a fun person to work with, that matters.
Okay.
over and above that, of course, you have to be someone who can learn a skill set, and you have to be someone who can, communicate. Those things don't work.
So, does it really matter if you have an MBA or if you're a plain graduate? Or why is it
Not
extra? Not much.
See, I'll tell you. There are certain jobs, and everyone learns it the hard way. There are certain jobs where they will want that MBA. There are definitely certain jobs where they will want the MBA, and the reason is also, see, if you're in consulting, right? They need those badges of honors. If you are Big Four, they need those, right? But most of the jobs, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that what kind of degree you have. Colleges do help. I mean, it is a signaling system, and it does work as a signaling system. There's no doubts about that. So there is enough data that also backs that. And colleges do help in recruitment, so that it feels like, oh, okay, people are looking for a certain skill set. It's almost, for a small company like ours, right? We won't even go to campuses. It doesn't matter whether it's an MBA or whether it's a CFA institute or whether it's who they are.
Yeah.
But for certain jobs it does matter, but for majority of them I don't.
Alright. We just had a question come in
Sure.
that said, what if we use all our investment strategies properly? The market will become efficient after some time. How do we still invest in an efficient market?
That's why you invest in index funds, right?
Yeah.
If you actually believe markets are going to become efficient, which is actually a very good question, then you should invest in index funds.
Okay. And then there were a couple of other questions that we've already gone through. That brings me to the end of all my questions. It's been such a fabulous session with you, Gaurav, and I know the kind of inputs you've given. I'm sure most of the students who've been through this session, they've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time. I hope.
Thanks for having me over, and good luck to everyone. Bye.
Thank you.